What's the state of the last Epoch a few weeks into its release? As an old lover of old school hack and slash games, I want to give you my opinion of it, now that I've invested enough hours into it. Actually, an embarrassing amount of hours. This video is going to be divided in several sections, which I will discuss separately, and the sections are going to be game performance, graphic design, audio design, new content and balance, gameplay and controls, campaign, and game content loop. I will put timestamps in the video description and in the first pinned content because recently YouTube has been quite wonky when it comes to timestamps and they often refuse to work. I want to start talking about game performance because it's something that has been bothering me a lot. The gigantic elephant in the room, of course, are going to be the servers, especially their abysmal status at release. For me, hack and slash games have mostly been a solo self-found love affair, so I've been playing the game exclusively offline since early access. But having people unable to play the game for days after release is obviously not acceptable. The devs have been working on it, things have been steadily improving, so now everyone can enjoy the game. But there is another pretty relevant issue that's impacting the gameplay, and that's the graphic performance. I played Last Epoch from 3 systems. A desktop with a Ryzen 7 3700X, 32GB of RAM, and an RTX 3060 with 12GB of RAM. A Lenovo Legion Pro laptop with a Ryzen 7 5800H, 16GB of RAM and a GTX 3060, and an Asus ROG Ally Extreme. On all of these systems, I'm having significant drop rates while playing the Last Epoch. And a quick look on Reddit or the game Discord will show that I'm not the only one. I could understand the game not being optimized for a platform like the Ally, but a single-player offline hack and slash game dropping well below 45 frames per second on a system like my desktop is absurd, and clearly a sign of poor graphic optimization. There can be fights during which the screen is a bit crowded, and if I was dropping from, 120 to 90 FPS, I would be fine-ish. But dropping from 120 plus to the low 40s during an ambush just because there are maybe 15 or so enemies on the screen is insane and needs improvement. From a visual point of view, I found the game to look beautiful. Environments are rich in details and there is a good tonal balance. It never looks too dark and dull, and also never looks too bright and cartoony. Animations are also very good for a hack and slash game. I found most skills and abilities, especially the more advanced ones, to provide a good visual feedback, and some feel very satisfying to use. I like how many starting abilities look very basic to use. Then, when for example you become a warlock, the first skill you unlock creates a fissure in the ground from which spirits and bolts come out. This happens for most classes and really gives you a great visual feedback that once we picked our subclass we made a really impactful decision. Enemies have plenty of attacks and animations as well. During some fights the screen can be a bit too crowded with attacks, making it a bit difficult to clearly tell what's going on, but from a purely visual point of view, I'm really pleased with the look of the game. Going back to the performance talk just for a moment, I would gladly take a reduction in environmental details and animation if that allowed the game to steadily run at 120 frames per second or 60 on my Ally. But I'm keeping my fingers crossed for better optimization rather than graphic downgrades. Moving on to the audio design, here the game gets a huge thumbs up from me. Sound effects are good, the voice acting is fine, the soundtrack fits the game very well. I often find myself taking a break from the game to eat or drink something or whatever, and I leave my character at the end of time to have that area music playing in the background. It's really soothing for me. Many hack and slash games that I've played over the course of decades were set on mute a few hours into the game, but the Last Epoch did a really good job here. Our character repeating the same lines over and over and over again during combat can be repetitive, but in a kind of game where we endlessly farm monsters, there's no real way around it. In terms of new content and balance, how does the release game compare to the early access one? For me, the early access game was already a complete game that just needed a bit of polish. At release, they added new features like the trading system and the Circle of Fortune, the latter of which has been invaluable for me as a solo self-found player. And we also got new classes and skills. I'm glad they didn't dump a ton of new, poorly tested content in the game. Instead, they added a relatively small but really good amount of stuff. The new classes feel a bit overtuned though, even without considering the Warlock bugged/overtuned abilities. I currently have a level 100 Blade Dancer, 85 Spellblade and a level 97 Warlock in release, My ethical warlock, built without using odd skills interaction, is going through content way quicker and safer than anything I played at release and in early access. Talking specifically about things that should be retuned would take a fairly long video. World scaling being out of control and usable by everyone is the first thing I would address if I were in the developer's shoes, but let's see what they will cook for the next cycle. Before I talk about the controls, I have to give you a full disclaimer. While I've owned several game consoles over the course of my life, playing with mouse and keyboard is deeply engraved in my muscle memory. A hack and slash game like the last Epoch for me is absolutely perfect to be played using mouse and keyboard. Yeah, sure, there's an auto-targeting system that helps when using a controller. It's a godsend because there are some abilities that when you want to target them, you will not be having a good time. The game is fine to be played via controller. It feels better compared to what it did during early access, but I still high favor mouse and keyboard. And outside of the really wonderful first experience of fighting Jalra and having to press D out of nowhere to avoid getting insta-gibbed, the game is a joy. It's very smooth to play. Do you want to talk about the campaign? Let's talk about the campaign. Is it memorable or a slog? On my first playthrough, I've enjoyed it a lot. There are some cool moments, some fun dialogues, time travel shenanigans, and it's designed in a way that clearly allows the developers to easily add more content in the game. It's very well thought out. On all my subsequent playthroughs though, we gain knowledge and share the gear between characters, the clear time gets shorter, but it can still feel a bit annoying to grind through all of it over and over again. The good part is that there is little to no backtracking to do, many side quests that can be skipped, but still there is a few hours of gameplay that time gates the endgame grind. Considering that with all my characters I made it to the endgame around level 55, I wish that once we completed everything in the campaign with one of our characters, a newly created one could get the option of appearing at the end of time or already at level 55. With no gear, no trained skills, your character is naked, you just start there. Having to repeat the campaign for each character during each cycle doesn't sound very appealing. If we only had to do it once per cycle on the first character, then it will feel much better. There is a way to skip the campaign, but considering that it takes little to no attention, I just prefer to go through the whole campaign on each character while I listen to some music or play a movie in the background. But please, Last Epoch guys, make it skippable. After completing the campaign, we finally make it to the endgame. But is it any good? I personally really dislike the dungeons. All of them no survivors. I cannot stand walking through a maze with plenty of dead ends that is populated by unrewarding trash mobs for several minutes when the only thing I care about is having a chat with Jalra to do some sweet crafting. I can understand the devs wanting to give us the feeling of entering an actual dungeon, but they're just poorly designed and a significant waste of time. Normal monoliths don't feel very good to play either. Any character who made it through the campaign is going to obliterate the normal monoliths. It's a nice way to grind some levels, get used to the monolith mechanics, possibly get some loot, but it should be reworked a bit to make it shorter, especially on characters past the first one. The devs have already improved this from early access, it was unbearable back then, but I'm still hoping it will get quicker. Getting past the normal monolith slog, we get to the empowered monoliths, and I believe they're one of the best designed endgame systems I've ever played in a hack and slash game. The game loop is extremely quick, there is no downtime between one echo and the next, and the difficulty of the game can be essentially set by us. We can keep building corruption until the point where we start to struggle a bit too much, and then we stay there looking for better gear to push it even further. Since higher corruption means better item rarity, pushing harder content feels rewarding, and it's actually helping our characters getting stronger. It's an extremely well thought out system. I have read some people complaining about the system feeling too repetitive and missing a true endgame goal, but I do not share the same opinion at all. In this kind of game, the goal isn't to kill the last boss. It's to keep grinding harder content, making our characters as strong as they can be, then go after chase items, then do the same with another character. The replayability of hack and slash games is usually a core component of the genre, and having a satisfying endgame loop that gives players the opportunity of having fun, fast, and rewarding session is what usually harder to design, and it separates great hack and slash games from forgettable ones. I believe the guys behind Last Epoch did a great job from this point of view, and I'm sure that with new cycles, new patches, new content and so on, the game will become even better over the course of the years. I've listed both negative and positive things about the game, so what's my overall view of it? It's extremely positive, because while some issues are definitely there, they do not detract value from one of the most fun and enjoyable hack and slash games I've played in a very long time. While my playing time in The Last Epoch is going to take a while to match what I did in Diablo 2 and Titan Quest, it's definitely up there with my favorites. And a game I'm expecting to play for years to come. Some of its edges can be a bit rough, a few things can be improved, but it's a really fun game to play with a solid foundation on which the devs will hopefully build something truly special that we will all be able to enjoy for a very long time. Hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Don't fuck it up.